Views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. Claudette brings fresh, innovative perspectives that push the boundaries of what organizational cultures can and should be. Learn how to catalyze your organization's workforce into an authentic, intentional, and financially successful culture. Now here's your host, Claudette Rowley.
Hello, everybody. I'm Claudette Rowley, and you are listening to Cultural Brilliance, the DNA of organizational excellence on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience some groundbreaking ways to transform your company's culture. Twice each month, we have some of the foremost experts on organizational culture and leadership helping you understand how to make a brilliant culture the rule rather than the exception. I am really excited today to have our guest, Janet Britcher, with us. And we're going to be talking about Janet's new book, Zoom Leadership, Change Your Focus, Change Your Insights. And I love Janet's book, so I'm so excited we get to have this conversation today so that all of you listening can benefit as well. So let me introduce Janet. Janet is a certified executive coach with extensive experience coaching leaders. Her approach is to build on existing strengths to help leaders really enhance their agility, accountability, and authenticity. That in turn invites employees to be more engaged, collaborative, productive, and it's transformative to their business results. As I mentioned, she's the author of the new book, Zoom Leadership, Change Your Focus, Change Your Insights. And along with that book, she offers workshops, individual coaching for leaders, group coaching for managers, as well as leadership and management workshops. She also helps boards when they're having retreats and management teams, and when they're having retreats to better look at their leadership and how they can improve it. Janet brings over 20 years of corporate leadership experience in management, human resources, and organizational development, and she's able to apply that to her coaching work. This human resources and management background provides a solid foundation from which to coach her clients as they deepen effective leadership skills. Janet holds an MBA with a concentration in organizational development from Boston College and also has many additional certifications in psychology and leadership. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Claudette. I'm so pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. As I was flipping through your book and reading it over and reading the introduction, I just got more and more excited to have this conversation with you. I'd love to start by asking you what really inspired you to write this book at this particular point in time?
Well, what inspired me to write it now is that I found over time helping leaders that I had an approach that was fairly straightforward and easy to remember. In my field, it's kind of fun to get involved with complex models and theories, and I love that. But my clients are leaders that have a job to do all day long, and they need something simple. And my experience before I started my business 15 years ago in human resources was that leaders don't get much training. They need help. They deserve a help, and nobody wakes up to decide to be a bad boss one day, but they don't get the training that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true, right? No one decides to wake up and be a bad boss. And I sometimes, when I'm doing different kinds of facilitation, I'll mention, your employees who are coming in and maybe not doing the job that you'd hope that they were doing, didn't wake up, to your point, and say, you know what, today I'm just not going to perform.
Yes.
It's not happening. No, people actually want to do a good job.
They do. And imagine if we didn't make nurses get training, or even plumbers or baristas for all that. We give them all training. Mm-hmm. But so often leaders get promoted because they were good at their last job. And so that's an issue that I really want to help resolve.
Yeah, it's so important. And just so we all understand, people listening in can understand exactly what we're talking about. When you say Zoom leadership, what do you mean?
I mean, the ability to change each of four lenses. So the book presents four lenses. The first one that's usually used in business is think. people are logical, they're analytical, they're scientific or engineering, and they look through that one lens. But if you think about getting closer or further from a decision, then it changes your perspective. And the book is really about how to change your perspective in a way that can help you with decisions. So let's say you're interviewing. Zooming in would be considering a certain candidate. Paul Smith, let's say, zooming into the analytics of what am I looking for, what are the qualifications. But zooming out through that thinking lens might be more about how many people do I need? What's the outcome I'm looking for? What's the result that I'd like to have? And what's the hierarchy of values or competencies that I'm looking for? So that's the zoom in and out through the first of four lenses.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it, to move just beyond the analysis of things, right?
That's right. Yeah. I'm a big fan of changing perspectives, and too often we get stuck in a default. Like if I'm really analytical and really detail-oriented, that's the lens I usually use. And that may be great for 50 or 70 or even 90% of the circumstances, but then you'll find something where that's not the one that's going to work best, and that's what I'm offering here.
And one of the other ones you mentioned, ACT, right, is another common lens.
That's right. That's the second most common because leaders, and I'm using leaders in a very broad sense. I think anyone who's ever been in a line that sees a process is not going well and has a better idea on some level is a leader. So in my opinion, you don't need to carry the leader title. But that idea of taking action, moving forward, that's the second most common one that leaders use. They hire or they say no to a recommendation or they spend money. They take an action. And again, getting closer to that, it might be deciding, let's say, pricing. Or zooming out from an action might be deciding market share. So that whole idea of getting closer or further along that lens.
Yeah, and one of the things that strikes me as well is how much information is missed when we don't. And you talk about in your book that one of our scarcest resources is attention span, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And this need to and I loved this. The need to quickly reframe, right? Can you tell us more about that skill of especially reframing in this? Like if we reframe, what's available?
What I think is available is a range of options, the ability to more systematically get out of a pattern of thinking and look at some other options through a lens that might not be the most common one. So it brings a range of options, but the problem it really solves is that sometimes you're stumped because you have no ideas how to address something, and sometimes you're overwhelmed. You have too many ideas. So the idea of looking through each of the four lenses and zooming in and out is that you can innovate, you can bring new ideas to yourself, and you can also narrow. And it's a way, I like to think of it as kind of searching in your own brain. If we had a Google for our own brain, what might that reveal? There's lots of expertise and insights and knowledge and education, but they're not always available in the moment you're stressed.
It's so true, right? What the stress does to the brain, right? And all the neuroscience we know exists. And one thing that struck me, what you just said is, we might have too many ideas, we might not have enough ideas, right? Because of the stress and overwhelm. And that sometimes in order for an organization to innovate, right, we know new ideas are needed, but you're getting down to it sounds like the individual, how does the individual person start to access new ideas so that they can join the group and innovate?
That's right. I start first with the individual, but certainly a group or a team or a leadership team can use the same approach.
Yeah, it just seems so, it's so applicable, right? It's so applicable to so many different situations.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I like about it. It's adaptable, that you can blend it with other things you know about, other things you're good at. You're not limited to using only this model. And that's one of the things. I think of it kind of like a folk song. You know, a folk song starts out, but then somebody adds another verse or somebody adds a different rhythm, makes it from folk to reggae. And that's kind of the idea I have with this is I want people to adapt it and include and incorporate and blend it with what else they know and are good at.
Definitely. And then what's the, we're going to be after we take our first break, we're going to be going into each one of these lenses more deeply, right? With, some examples and really have a chance to look at them. But I'm curious when we, feel and witness, right, are two of the other lenses. I know they're less common, but what have you seen with those two lenses? What's your take on them?
Well, the way I introduced the feel lens is that 20 years ago, let's say, emotions at work didn't get a lot of respect. But starting with the publication of Emotional Intelligence, that it was a way to not only justify and defend and present the value of emotions and feelings at work, but to make it very layman friendly. It was using scientific research, but it presented in a very readable format. So this idea of emotional intelligence and empathy, people now realize it's hugely important to decision making, and decisions are not made logically. If you do the research, decisions are really made emotionally.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I've actually a really interesting story you may be familiar with. I'd love to share when we come back from our break. So you are listening to Cultural Brilliance, the DNA of Organizational Excellence. I'm Claudette Rowley, if you're just joining us. We're going to take a quick break and stay tuned. And when we come back, we were going to continue to talk about this really interesting idea of what happens to our perceptions and decisions when we look through different lenses.
Tune in to Lucid Planet Radio with Dr. Kelly Neff. This hit show will illuminate your senses and empower you beyond your daily stressors and hardships. Renowned psychologist and author Dr. Kelly will captivate you with far-reaching topics and amazing guests as you wake to the greatest version of yourself. Learn to tap into your intuitions, think critically about our world, heal emotional and psychological wounds, and follow your passions to live your dreams. The Lucid Planet. Welcome home. Visit lucidplanetradio.com for more information. What if your body and mind were the compasses to the secrets, mysteries, and magic of life? Glenna Rice, co-host of The Questionable Parent, is inviting you to access all that is possible. Glenna is a 10-year certified veteran access consciousness facilitator who offers an amazing variety of life-changing classes and workshops. Work with Glenna from anywhere, with teleclasses and workshops all over the globe. To learn more and see Glenna's current schedule of events, classes, and workshops, visit glennarice.com. Curious about the meaning of life? Do you want to deepen your spiritual practice? The School for Esoteric Studies offers online training to spiritual seekers from all paths of life and individual coaching. Our courses synthesize Eastern and Western spiritual traditions based on meditation, study, and service applied to everyday life. The school also organizes group meditations each year to benefit humanity. Whether you're just beginning to reflect on the spiritual side of your life or are a more experienced spiritual seeker, the school warmly welcomes you to join our group. To learn more about our courses and services, please visit esotericstudies.net. That's esotericstudies.net.
Tune in to the hit show Mouthing Off with Chef Rossi. Chef Rossi mouths off about different subjects in pursuit of breaking down walls and opening up your minds. She and Dr. Pat banter back and forth, taking from the headlines of the day on subjects that reach beyond what goes on in the world into your hearts. And go to theragingskillet.com to find out more and let Chef Rossi know what's on your mind.
Miss any shows during the week? Don't worry, we've got you covered. With the free Transformation Talk Radio app, you'll have access to all of the past week's shows in the palm of your hand. Yeah! Tune in to Transformation Talk Radio anywhere you go with our free app for any of your devices. Check out our app in the App Store and Google Play Store today.
We're back on Cultural Brilliance, the DNA of organizational excellence. I'm Claudette Rowley, and for those of you just joining us, my guest today is Janet Britcher, and she is the author of a new book called Zoom Leadership, Change Your Focus, Change Your Insights. And we're having a really interesting conversation about the role of perception in leadership. One of the things we were talking about right before we went to break was the looking through the lens of feeling, right? And Janet was just saying how the emotions and feelings have really gained some respect, thankfully, right, over the last decade or so at work. And Janet, one of the things when you said that popped to mind was an interesting piece of neuroscience research I read recently that talked about this researcher was looking at or was studying people who had brain damage in the part of the brain that controls emotion. And as he studied these folks, he actually realized that they could no longer make decisions because so many of our decisions, right, have an emotional component. Like he said, even people who are deciding between having a turkey sandwich or a chicken sandwich for lunch, right, seems pretty straightforward. Except you could do pros and cons till the end of time, but ultimately most of us are going to pick turkey or chicken based on what we just kind of feel like, right? Because they're so similar. So I thought that was fascinating about this, down just in the brain that emotion really counts for decision making and how often that's missed.
I think that's right. And the other arena where I look at that is the field of behavioral economics. I'm no expert there, but the whole idea that decisions around finances are not financial, they're not logical, and that the stock market is in large part an emotional tool representing optimism and hopefulness or pessimism. And so to me, juxtaposing the feeling in something so seemingly logical as the stock market is such a good example using that behavioral economics point of view.
Oh, it's a great example, isn't it? Yeah. So much emotion and money and finances.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the other really important lens we wanted to introduce was the witness, right? The witness lens.
Yes, and I would say that's less, it's got less visibility in corporate, but I'm going to be here to advocate for it.
Yay.
So, in the witness lens, I include what some people might call mindfulness, or some people might call bystander or observer. And a situation where that comes up is, first of all, being mindful of yourself and your own reaction, because if we don't see that with a bit of objectivity, it kind of drives the bus. But if you can see, ooh, that story triggered me because I had a similar story, if you can notice yourself, or if somebody challenges you, if you can consider, well, does that have a good point? Am I being defensive or should I entertain it? So first, being witness to your own reaction. But then the other thing I often think of is when somebody comes into your office and vents, sits down and vents. Most people out of helpfulness will come up with answers. Try this, try that, try this, try that. And if you're like me, you have found that those recommendations don't usually work. They're either not received or they didn't have enough background to be relevant. So very often, if someone comes into your office and plunks down and vents, they just need to be heard. And being able to reflect, what you heard is so helpful in them getting grounded, maybe in their own feelings or in their own options, their own next steps or actions, just helping them get clear by articulating what's on their mind. And that's what I mean by the witness lens.
Mm-hmm. I would wonder if this isn't the most important lens.
Oh, good point. Yes.
This, like you're saying, it's mindfulness and reflection, and it's self-awareness, right? Who am I, right? How am I operating?
Yes.
What's my impact? What, all of that. And then the, what I think, especially in my working organizational culture, the very, very important role of the observer, right?
Yeah.
The person who's standing outside of things and can say, I'm not sure if you're aware, ... right? I saw this interaction. I'm noticing this in our culture. So I'm very fascinated by that one.
And again, zooming in from not only an individual point of view, but an organizational point of view, zooming in, you might say, are we a culture that, let's say, interrupts?
Mm-hmm.
Just observing, and do we regard that as rude, or do we regard that as energetic and participating?
Great point.
You could zoom out and think about, well, is our culture one of friendliness or acceptance? And then be able to evaluate, well, does that make us wishy-washy? Does that make us not rigorous? And so even on an organizational level, this idea of getting closer or further from an issue provides perspective and options. So I'm a big fan that the more perspectives you have, the more options you have. And if you have more choice, more options, then there's a greater likelihood that you will reach a decision that you feel really solid about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing that's coming up for me, I agree. One thing that's coming up for me is this, the idea of zooming in and zooming out. And I'm just going to ask you an incredibly general question. So I know it may be a case by case, but where do people tend to be? Like, are they sort of in the middle? Like, we're not really zoomed in, but we're not really zoomed out? Or where do folks tend to fall?
I think of it more as folks tend to have a default.
Right.
So again, back to the witness lens, if you're aware of your default, let's say you're great with detail and you tend to be there, then your prompt to yourself might be, I've tried that action for that dilemma before and detail is my default. Let me zoom out. Mm-hmm. So that awareness of default applies, in my opinion, not only to the zoom in and zoom out, but also to the 4 lenses. It's not that we can't all use all of them. It's that we tend to have a favorite one where we start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I know you have a current event example for us, right?
I do.
You do, yes.
I do. I look at the United Airlines issue that occurred this spring as a very good example of having a fixed focus and not budging from the first idea that came to mind. And that flight, some of you will remember, was in Chicago and destined for Louisville. The plane was fully boarded when the crew of that plane discovered that they needed to add 4 crew going to Louisville, 2 pilots and 2 stewardesses, in order to fly a plane leaving Louisville. And when they realized this, they took action, and they thought logically, and they offered one solution, which is up to $800. And that's where they stopped. And when only 3 people accepted that offer, they called the police. And by some algorithm, which we have never learned, they chose a particular passenger, Dr. Dow, to remove from the plane. He was not wanting to leave. He had a paid ticket. He had another important commitment, and he did not want to go. But their action got stuck on call the police. It was a logical thinking action, and then pick up the phone, call them, and then drag them off the plane. Mm-hmm. Now, if through that thinking lens, they had gotten a little closer to the detail, They might have thought, we're authorized to offer up to $1,200. Let's see if we have any takers. Or if they had zoomed out of their action, of their logical decision, they might have thought, is there some other way we could make space? Or is there some other airline that could transport these four? Or is there some crew already in Louisville? So thinking logically, if they had zoomed out, it would have been several options they could have thought of. And if you go to the action lens, they had fixed focus on call the police and drag him off the plane. If they had gotten closer to what action could I take, they might have called their boss and said, can we offer more than $1,200? Can we offer $1,500? Some of you may know they have raised that now to $12,000 because of the fallout from this. If they had zoomed out of action, they might have thought of other options. And certainly the feeling lens was not deployed at all.
No.
Right? If they had thought, how will that passenger feel? It would have stopped them. If they had thought, how will the other passengers feel observing this? If they had zoomed in on that, even if they had zoomed out to how will I feel in the morning about my participation in this disastrous action?
Right.
Or how would regulators feel, and will they impose more sanctions? So that feeling lens was not used at all. And certainly the witness lens was not used by the airline, although it was used by other passengers who videotaped the event, and that's why it went viral.
Right. And that's a very practical use of witness, the witness lens, right? We'll literally record this as witnesses. Right.
Exactly.
So we all know what actually occurred. Wow. I mean, what a great, thank you for sharing such a great, such a specific concrete example, because almost all of us know about this, the United situation, and to take us through and to see that they had so many other options available to them.
Yes.
And I mean, they clearly did, but especially when we look through your four lenses, we really see that they did, and that a lot of what was going on internally for them was blocking what they did externally, right?
Yes. Yeah. Even in the thinking lens, what ended up happening, of course, is their stock value dropped, which at first was $140 million in one day. So if you think, well, logically, we can't offer more than $800. No, even using their own lens and their own fixed focus would have opened up other ways of understanding the cost of making such a bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great, just such a great illustration, right, of what can go wrong when we really don't zoom in and zoom out and look through these lenses. Yeah. So we're going to go to break, take a quick break. I'm Claudette Rowley, and you are listening to Cultural Brilliance Radio. When we come back, Janet Britcher and I will continue talking about some really fascinating ways we can apply these four lenses. Stay tuned.
Are you stuck in unhealthy habits, toxic relationships, and low self-esteem? Do you crave a life of inspiration, love, self-acceptance, and fun? Sounds like you're on the verge to your next big thing. Join Laura Richer, host of On the Verge Radio, helping you use your breakdown for a breakthrough, overcome life's greatest challenges, and live the life you want and deserve. Tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio, or visit SeattleHealingHypnosis.com for more information.
A word of caution: if you prefer the status quo and you are not interested in improving every aspect of your life, this book will trigger the shift out of you. The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens is available now. Author Colette Steffen brings the powerful knowledge and life-changing energy and empowerment from the radio airwaves to the pages of her new book. To get your copy in paperback or ebook, visit thetruthisfunny.com today.
Calling all moms, it's time to awaken your vibrant, intuitive, loving self in every area of your life. Join host Debbie Pokornik as she shares thoughts, stories, and tools to help you stand in your power. Listen to Vibrant, Powerful Moms helping everyday women create extraordinary lives. Mondays at 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. For more information about Debbie, visit empoweringenergy.com. That's empowering with letters NRG.com.
Isn't it time to put your health first, to give yourself the gift of whole body wellness? What if embracing unconditional love and self-care was the first step to wellness? Could you honor that for yourself? My name is Audrey Michelle, host of Rewired Life Radio and the author of Rewired Life, A Journey to Untangle Chronic Pain and Endometriosis. In my book, I share how I healed from 17 years of chronic pain and disease. Get your signed copy at audreymichelle.com/book, spelled MICHEL.com/book.
Did you know that all of the shows on the Transformation Radio Network are available as podcasts to stream or download?
Really?
Check us out. Go to transformationradio.fm. We have business shows, spiritual shows, energy healing shows, and pretty much everything in between. Something for everyone, guaranteed to inspire, educate, and transform. We are transforming the world, one listener at a time.
Get ready to experience Truth Talk Radio with host Deb Acker. Tune in to Truth Talk Radio each Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com to illuminate the truth in your daily life as you experience life, love, and abundance from a whole new perspective. This hit show will leave you feeling lighter and bring you into a place of infinite possibilities every day in every way. Visit TruthTalkRadioshow.com for upcoming transformative topics and guests.
We're back on Cultural Brilliance Radio. I'm Claudette Rowley. For those of you just joining us, my guest today is Janet Britcher, who is the author of a really, really important and informative book called Zoom Leadership. Change your focus, change your insights. And Janet, one thing I wanted to ask you about before I forget is there, if people want to purchase your book, learn more about your work, what is the best way for them to find out about you?
Yes, they can find it on Amazon, and also on my website. My company is Transformation Management, and my website is transformationmanagement.com, and they can learn more about it there.
Excellent. Thank you. So Amazon or transformationmanagement.com.
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. So I know one thing we were, as we were going through and talking about the different lenses of think, act, feel, and witness, one of the things that's coming up is that so many leaders, and as you said earlier, a leader is not just someone who at the C level, right? Yeah. It can be anyone in an organization who's leading something. Yes. But as leaders, there's so much pressure, right, to make a decision, that things just become very fixed, right? So if I'm pressured to make a decision constantly, I probably will, unless I'm careful, look through whatever my own lens is, right? And just keep making decisions through that. So how do we help leaders step back a little bit?
Well, I think one of the techniques really is to try to reduce the amount of stress, because what we know about stress in the field you mentioned, I love the neurology of leadership. We're learning so much more year on year about how our brain works. When we're stressed, our brain constricts. And you actually, in that moment, know less than you really know. As anyone who's ever lost the keys that are right in front of them,
right,
has been able to testify, right? When we're under stress, we don't have access to all the good ideas, to the innovation that's available. So one of the things that I offer in this is a way to say to yourself, all right, I've got a methodology. I don't have to choose between good and good or bad and bad, because some choices are actually good choices. Do I want a vacation in Virginia or do I want a vacation in Washington? That some choices are pleasant but mutually exclusive. So, or some choices are, this candidate really doesn't meet my needs and that one doesn't either. Should I choose one of them anyhow, or should I start over? Those are hard choices. So the idea of reducing the amount of stress Certainly, I'm a big advocate of all the mindfulness techniques. Take a deep breath, count to 10, and then being able to use a methodology like 4 lenses. You can remember 4 things. You can remember that.
Yeah.
And over time, it'll become a little more automatic. And I think that's the best way to think about it, is to take a moment, realize that the outcome isn't urgent. So many decisions in business are not immediately urgent. And using that one decision-making, another aspect of the neurology of leadership is a hypothesis gets stored in our brain like a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so you form a hypothesis and you forget that it's not a fact and act on that as if it's the only course. So giving yourself permission to take time to make a good decision, making a pact with a coworker. Hey, I'm stumped on this. Do you have 5 minutes? Journaling is a great way. Send yourself an email. Here's my dilemma. Here's what I'm thinking. Wait 10 minutes. Take a walk around. Come back. Anything you can do to pause just a little bit will increase and enhance the ability you have to access your own brain more effectively.
Yeah, and those are just great suggestions, right? And they don't take much time. Take a 10-minute walk around the building, right?
That's
something
right.
like that, where you can just, I know sometimes I will get solutions to things, I might be working on at the gym, right? I might have gone for a walk, to your point, where I'm just giving my brain a break.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden it'll pop in my head and that's exactly right. That is the thing to do, and I just have a sense that it's the right way to move forward. And if I'd made the decision earlier, I probably would have come up with something else that wasn't as good, right?
I think that's exactly right. Working out at the gym, taking a walk, those are great ways to give our brain a break and to be open to insights that might surface.
Yeah. And when we're in that, like you said, stressed, focused mental state, there's just no room, right? There's no room for that creativity anymore.
That's right.
Yeah. So it would be great to hear an example from one of your clients. Is there one you can share, like how you took them through this process and what happened?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me bring up a client I'll call Malcolm. This is in the book, and the book is comprised of applying the model through dialogue with cases that I actually had over the years. So each of them really happened. Of course, I changed the details to preserve confidentiality, but that's mainly what the book is comprised of. It's these coaching sessions where you can actually watch it happening. So Malcolm was a tax accountant who had recently been recruited away from a company he had been at for 17 years. He was in his new job about 3 months, and his boss, Richard, called me and said he was worried about the cultural fit. Something I'm sure, Claudette, that you've come in contact with the work.
Yes,
you do.
Definitely, yes.
So, but he was brilliant, well-regarded, had a big reputation in his niche, and they really did want to keep him. But 17 years at an old company leaves you feeling like you know how to navigate, but you know how to navigate somewhere else.
Exactly.
So when I met with him, I asked, do you know why your boss Richard has asked me to work with you? And he started, as you might expect, with his thinking lens. Somebody trained like that in accounting, in tax. And he said, I know my directness has been an issue, but in my last job, they understood me. I don't waste time on needless conversation. I get right to the point. That's good for the client, and it's good for all of us. And so there's his thinking lens. He's really focused. He's got his logic, and it's good logic. But then I asked, how is that received? And he admits, people here don't get it. He said, they don't get my contribution. I can be blunt, but blunt's efficient. It's me coming to the point. So he knew that his bluntness was a problem. But still, he was using it because in his old organization that had worked. I wondered, I'm looking now, I'm thinking, what's going to motivate him? What's on his mind that would make him receptive? And he said, well, I'm not getting the kind of credit and recognition that I'm used to. So he was concerned about the criticism. And even though that's kind of a thinking logic lens, I also hear a little bit of the feeling lens. They're not always quite separate. Mm-hmm. And so I asked, what happens when you lose the audience, the listeners, with one of your ideas? And he complains they push back before I even have a chance to explain. And then I asked, what do you want to be different? Again, a very thinking lens kind of question. He said, people shouldn't complain that I'm arrogant or bulldozing them. I'm not. So perceptions, I asked him about your intentions or something you'd like to change. Again, I'm staying with him in that thinking lens. And then finally, he said, yes, he does want to change their perceptions. And then I offered a framework that he responded to. And that was, I said, well, what if the culture here is just kind of upside down for you? And I told him about an exhibit I had seen in a museum where the leader wore fancy sandals but no crown. And I said, you're in a culture where everything is upside down to you. You have a different, faster pace of thinking and speaking. And what if it was simply a cultural disconnect? And it was such a relief to him. He said, then it's not so much that things are wrong with me as the perceptions others have. I do have anxiety about all the balls I'm bouncing. Mm-hmm. So as soon as the thinking lens was somewhat addressed, he was able to move his lens to feeling, which surprised me, frankly, that he could do that and open that question of anxiety. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I stayed with that feeling lens and asked him a little more about it. And he said, I know I'm capable. How can I help it if they don't get it? Switching back to the thinking, like, I'm right, they're wrong. Mm-hmm. So then I went with him to the thinking lens and I asked, how do you define success? He said, being clear and direct and forceful, which was actually the complaint about him. So I said, what else is being asked of you now? And he paused and said, my interactions, I guess. Mm-hmm. 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 So what I was going for was understanding his motivation for making a change. If he could get out of thinking logically that his approach, which had, in fairness, always served him well, might be modified for the new culture if he could look at the new culture's requirement not as making him wrong or incompetent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like with more inviting him in a way to be more of a witness to it, right? Himself and them.
Good point. Yes.
Right. So that he could start to see, right, how he fit in or wasn't fitting in, right? It sounds like you were helping him generate more options.
That's right. That's right. And I said, what would it look like? So now I'm thinking about the acting lens. What would it look like if you're willing to do some of this different? Mm-hmm. He said, I could bite my tongue, say less, and listen more. Which is right. So his new actions had to be different. And as we developed that, he had a meeting the next day and we kind of thought through that. And I said, well, how are you going to do that with this person? He said, I don't know. Stephen always says a sentence and then it takes him forever to say the next sentence. And I guess I interrupt him. I move in so quickly, I interrupt him. So I said, how are you going to remind yourself to bite your tongue, say less, and listen more? Because I found people can't just stop doing something. They have to substitute.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I'll have to look out the window. The guy's office is right at the window. I'll have to look out the window while I'm waiting, and I'll have to count while I'm waiting to get my...
That's a great Sorry, go ahead, Janet. Yeah.
That was, he knew what he had to do, and he had a way of doing it.
Yeah, and what a great, great story. Thank you so much for sharing that and really bringing this to life for us. And we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the feel and witness lens and how you can start to bring more of that into your leadership, if that's something that you that would benefit you and your organization. So you're listening to Cultural Brilliance Radio. I'm Claudette Rowley. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Transformation Talk Radio is dedicated to the education and awareness of Lyme disease.
Welcome to Lyme Talk Radio. I'm Dr. Pat Basile, the host of the Dr. Pat Show, and I am so thrilled that we've created this venue for all of you out there.
Dr. Pat Basile will be bringing the most innovative, groundbreaking information, research, treatment innovations, and stories from those it affects every day.
What we have heard is that you want to ensure for us that we keep positive, holistic, uplifting, transformative talk radio on the air. We're excited to bring you the contemporary conversations about Lyme disease.
We promise not to let the light fade on Lyme.
So fasten your seat belts. We've got lots more to share with you in the weeks to come.
Tune into Lyme Talk Radio with Dr. Pat and help keep our mission strong on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
TheAngelLady.net. 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 1-800-323-1790. 1-800-323-1790. Sue Storm. TheAngelLady.net.
Wow. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. This is Talk Radio to Thrive By. I'm telling you, I got to pinch myself some days, because when each of us gets called to do something that we so not thought was in our wheelhouse to do for a purpose that's so much greater than us, we get to show up and shine.
If you would like to show up and shine on the Dr. Pat Show as a co-host or sponsor, send us an email to inspire@thedrpatshow.com.
Gifted intuitive healer and spiritual teacher Sarah Luce brings her unique style to the hit show Small Steps, Big Breakthrough Radio on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Tune in each month as Sarah turns reality on end and shows us how to experience expansive results with simple yet powerful steps. Expect an enlightening bend on what you currently believe is possible. For show details and upcoming topics, visit sarahluce.com. That's SARALOOS.com.
Now you can be a part of one of the most powerful programs to help create a more joyful, loving, abundant, and peaceful world. Every day at 12 noon in any time zone, join millions of other people around the world to spend a few minutes in joy, love, and gratitude. Brought to you by Robert Schoenfeld, host of the Art of Powerful Living Radio. Together, we can raise the vibration of the planet. For more information, visit globalmomentofjoy.com.
Hi, everybody. We're back on Cultural Brilliance Radio. I'm Claudette Rowley, and I have been having a really interesting, fun conversation with Janet Britcher. For those of you just joining, she is the author of Zoom Leadership. So, Janet, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about are the four lenses of think, act, feel, and witness. And one thing you said right from the get-go, right at the beginning of our conversation, was in the business world, particularly in the U.S., the think lens and the act lens, right, are the go-to lenses in most cases. And right, feel and witness are less used.
Yes.
So how can organizations and individual leaders start to incorporate the feel and witness lenses?
Well, again, I think it's acknowledging how much I'm going to speak ironically through the think lens to activate the feel lens. And that is how much information that we're missing if we don't use the feel lens. I had a client say to me recently, I know you'll be proud of me. I didn't get angry. And I said, actually, that's not my goal. I mean, you might not want to act out your anger, but knowing the source of anger is hugely important. Mm-hmm. I very often in coaching sessions have clients say, I'm really frustrated and I don't even know why. And, let's just get down to business. And I always think, no, if you're frustrated and aggravated, there's something there we need to think about. There's data. So if your default is the thinking lens, a way that I would try to bring this to light is to say, there's data missing if you don't use your feeling lens. Mm-hmm. And because people who don't tend to start there are thinkers, and that's something that does resonate. And then the other thing is affirming. So if you have an opportunity, whether with staff that work for you, or if you have a coach, or even if you make an agreement to be mutually supportive, having someone else affirm what you're feeling. First of all, noticing how much that reduces stress. Just knowing someone else really gets it reduces stress right there. And furthermore, brings clarity. So having that experience of having feelings recognized and acknowledged. Second of all, then you have the data from feeling, and you have a new world of options and opportunities that open up from that. So I would say that to keep it going is find someone that's affirming. Again, you could journal, but noticing how much more energy you have when you're not trying to suppress the feelings that can inform you.
So important, isn't it? Feelings are a source of information, right? Emotions are a source of information. Yeah. Yes. And you're missing so much with suppression. That's absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Missing so much, and also spending, or sometimes I call it leaking energy. Mm-hmm. Also, people often don't know how to navigate between feeling and action. So if you feel angry, it doesn't mean you should blow up at your boss, let's say. Right. At your client. But you can notice it, and then notice, well, what kind of professional options remain for me? What can I do that's appropriate? So I had one client recently who was very frustrated about someone's participation in a meeting who she felt was not really needed in that meeting because that leader had sent another ambassador, let's call him, to the meeting. And time after time was really frustrated. So, well, what do you want to do? She said, I want to ask her not to come. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, how do you feel about doing that? And she said, I guess I could.
Yeah.
So using that, but she had been so professional, kind of overriding her own need to have a more productive meeting. She was overriding her feeling and not getting what she needed. When she asked the person not to come, it was no big deal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So being informed by her feeling and frustration was very useful to her. She was able to take an action she would not have taken if she hadn't dived into that.
Right. And it's such an important point. I often think of anger as a signal something's not working for me, right? Yes. I need to look at this situation, and see, is there any action for me to take or not? Do I need to say something or not, right? And so if I were to ignore that anger, I would lose out on that opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another way to amplify the use of witness is if you've been a leader in meetings, then you know who are most likely to talk and who are not. And you could let the quieter ones know in advance that you're going to be asking, what did you observe? Mm-hmm. Because very often quiet people are quite attentive. they are observing. They may not be speaking. You might feel they're not, quote, participating or making a contribution. But in my experience, they're a very valuable source of observation or witness. Mm-hmm. And as long as you give them a little advance notice and don't catch them by surprise, you can begin to end your meetings with, and what did you notice, Kim? Or what did you notice, Sam? And really be open to, and then acknowledge their observations, because they can serve to synthesize issues or synthesize trends of decision making, or even to synthesize whether or not you got to a decision and an action plan.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's so respectful of them, right? And honoring of what they see as observers.
Yes.
Yeah. What did you see and notice? Oh, well, I noticed throughout the entire meeting, X, Y, and Z was happening, right?
Yes.
And you can go from there. So, well, one thing I'd love to ask you to share, Janet, is a personal message. What would you love to leave listeners with today?
I would say that remembering you're all proficient in think, act, feel, and witness. These are skills and abilities we all have, and it's just a question of remembering to use them methodically when you're stumped. We all know about zooming closer and further because we use it on maps and zooming in on camera lenses. So remembering we're all proficient with getting closer and further from issues. And remembering that that's a metaphor for the ability to methodically consider options.
And thank you. So I love that, because it just says, hey, we can all do this, right?
Yes.
This is available. So, and you have an event coming up, right?
Well, I do. I have a presentation at Williams College. I have a presentation at some Boston libraries, and I have an offer for your listeners, if they're in the Boston area. As part of my book promotion tour this fall, I will be giving free lunch and learn hour-and-a-half presentations inside of companies. So if you have an interest in that and can get back to me by the end of the week, I'd be happy to discuss that further.
Awesome. What a great offer. Thank you. So for folks in the Boston area, lots of opportunities to interact with Janet. If you're not in the Boston area, take a look at the book, go on her website, and she has so much to offer there. So I'd love to thank you so much, Janet, for being on the show today and sharing this really great information. And I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in to Cultural Brilliance Radio. As always, I had a great time. Please join me the second and fourth Fridays of each month at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And next, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have Samantha Thomas on, who's the executive director of an organization called Dream Change. And we're going to be hearing more about their cutting-edge work in the business world. Have a great week, and I'll see everybody next time.
You've been listening to the hit show Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. You can download this podcast and find out more about Claudette and her breakthrough work at ClaudetteRowley.com. Please contact Claudette and find out how you can create a brilliant culture.